The MMO genre, I love it. Most of you love it as well. It's where I spent 20 years of my life, and I don't play them as much anymore. I really don't, and that bothers me. I raid every week over in Final Fantasy XIV. I drop into World of Warcraft for the new patch and play a bunch of that up until the grind started, and then I drop into like Guild Wars where there's a big chunk of content waiting for me, and then I drift away. Number of reasons for that. One is time and my own personal fears about being engrossed in one game for the remainder of my life, because I love video gaming in general. But the other is the elephant in the room that's not often talked about. It's mentioned off camera in various conversations, but an interview with Colin, the lead dev behind Guild Wars 3 this week, actually just outright said it, which the MMO genre is dying. A slow, painful, poisonous death, and it has been for the last 10 years. And the reason for that is stagnation. But thankfully for us, at least a couple of the big three are trying to do something about it and finally taking a risk.
But if you yearn for horizons unexplored, for fellowship and purpose, for a cause worth dying for, to you, we can promise magic.
I've definitely addressed this a couple of times. You might hear off-the-cuff comments during announcements is that our player base is getting older. Things along those lines. What they're actually saying is the people playing MMOs now are the people who were playing MMOs when they kind of were at their height of popularity. But they're not bringing in anywhere near enough fresh blood, new blood. The young uns are just not interested in those old nerdy farming and chopping trees type games as they once were. It is not where college students are spending their entire life as it was during the height of MMOs. And so that older player base has inspired lots of change, because either they flat out have families and careers that don't allow them to play MMOs anymore and they drift away, or they yearn for the older days when I could spend my hours in Silithus just farming carapaces from the little bug people and blah blah blah, which is obviously resonated with a lot of people with the overwhelming popularity of Classic and all its many variants that World of Warcraft has launched over the past 18 months or so. They've done extremely well with that, and it's done very, very gangbusters for those players who did yearn for the older times when things were simpler and it was nice and content. And I have no issue with that whatsoever, and it in fact makes total sense for a generally aging player base. But that does mean that the poison is ticking through the veins. What was the last major innovation you guys can think of in MMOs? Now, I know some of you will only play one game, so you're not aware of what's going on in the other ones, and that's fine. But I was thinking about this for a while, and it was probably the introduction of Mythic Plus during Legion in World of Warcraft, which is a very long time ago. I'm sorry. It was a very, very long time ago. Since then, we haven't really seen any major innovation. Nothing's moved forward. And even Mythic Plus is simply a different version of what we've already had in ARPGs like Diablo and PoE for a very, very, very long time. It's not new. Wasn't super creative. It was just a good system to bring in, which did force the other teams to respond. We had Criterion dungeons come from FF14 because people were yearning for that kind of content, and fractals came into Guild Wars, all those kinds of things, because it makes sense. Of course, as we all know, the MMO companies all borrow from each other because risk. We're going to talk about a lot about risk today. Nobody likes taking a risk, and rightfully so. Risk has a lot of problems, especially with MMOs. Let's talk about how expensive MMOs are to make. Really, really expensive, because unlike a single-player game or even big multiplayer games, you're not making one singular focus. That's not what you're doing. Think of it like running a restaurant. A lot of games in other genres are generally trying to create one really good meal. MMOs are trying to create the whole menu. We often refer to it as a buffet. People love raiding, people love collecting, people love glamour, transmog, people love pets, people love exploring, people love lore. All these different elements of the buffet, whatever yours might be, you probably have a favorite thing, and then you might dip your hands into the other things, and then there are certain aspects of that buffet that you just don't like, so you never touch. However, that is somebody else's favorite thing. And when you shake things up, when you take a risk and add a new menu item, or perhaps change the whole buffet menu entirely, people get very, very upset. It's surprising how delicate the MMO ecosystem can be, but I'm sure some of you have had, or in fact all of you, some experience with somebody who was drawing their line in the sand at something you might have found quite arbitrary. Because, going back to the buffet analogy again, if your worst thing is taken away, you don't care. Why would you? If you are a diehard raider, you are a raid logger, in fact, you log in, you raid, you do some stuff outside of raiding, which is mandatory in order to keep up, you farm your tomestones, or you go and do your Mythic Plus to fill a vault, whatever it might be. You do that stuff, but only in service of being a raider, and they take away something you don't care about, like pet battling. You don't care. However, if you have no interest in raiding and you want to do pet battling and they take that away or shake that system up or do whatever, as we've seen, some people get extremely and rightfully upset about those things. They cost so much to make because they're creating this entire menu that they don't want to take a risk. They want to guarantee they can get that money back. What we saw a couple of years ago was Ghostcrawler, former lead director of World of Warcraft, who moved over to Riot. He left Riot and they restarted their MMO project, which is seemingly still going. They recently hired Halinka, former PvP head and class designer of World of Warcraft, has joined that team in the last couple of weeks. When he left, there was a very long Twitter post about it. Now, while he was professional, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, what I took away from it was that he was kind of fed up with the lack of risk and innovation they were taking. This is how I look at MMO development these days, and in fact for the last 10 years, which is the stagnation we're talking about. I picture it like going to get an ice cream, but every flavor is vanilla. And what they have is a variety of toppings. They have sauces, sprinkles, whatever it might be. But underneath the sprinkles, which is what you prefer, there's still just vanilla ice cream. And what I mean by that is, when you think of an MMO, you probably think of very similar things. There's going to be some sort of leveling, which is going to be the campaign, whatever it might be, and then you're going to hit endgame. Then there's going to be gear collection. There's probably going to be some sort of talent tree, maybe not, maybe some sort of power gain, and then you can have a whole bunch of endgame daily content or whatever it might be in order to acquire some sort of currency or whatever it might be, dressed in different packages. And then you have the sprinkles and the toppings, right? Which are going to be the theme, the IP, the look, the style, the art style, the UI, whatever it might be. Those are the different things on top, but underneath is the same thing. We're going to use a lot of food analogies today because I think it's easier. And that's where the genre has stagnated, because every time I look at a brand new MMO, Aeon 2 is about to come out. I'm like, yeah, I kind of get what this is going to be, but they'll have a focus on flying, and that's going to be their sprinkles, something along those lines. But I kind of know what I'm going to get into. And for me now, after loving this genre for as long as I have, that's the stuff that puts me off. I don't really want to taste vanilla ice cream anymore. I want something new. I want something interesting. But, as I said, thankfully, some risks are being taken. I want to stress again, I don't blame the big companies that are trying to put something out there for not wanting to take that much risk to guarantee a return on that money. Because once that money is spent, you need to earn it back. Otherwise, you've wasted your time, which is a big problem. And we can see, and have seen, certainly over the last couple of years, that lack of innovation, that lack of creativity, and that lack of funding can lead to many problems. New World has fallen. We had in the last couple of weeks that Destiny 2 is waving the white flag. We saw Ghostcrawler's new project, Magic Pixel Castle, I believe they were called, where I luckily got to take part in the closed, super early pre-even assets gameplay loop to give feedback on. Has also bit the bullet, despite the fact that I spoke with Ghostcrawler at the time about whether they were funded to get this out to market, and they were pretty comfortable at that point. A few months later, it was not meant to be. They're super expensive, and risk is scary. So, Colin addressed this. I can't tell you what a breath of fresh air this was to hear one of these major devs to talk about what is a common awareness in the industry out on stage. As Colin pointed out, is we're all feeling it. And now they've announced Guild Wars 3.
We've consistently heard this from all of you too, that you feel like this genre is ready for something new, that it is stagnated, that we've all been playing the same games for the most part for over a decade. And I think this is when ArenaNet's at its best, when we challenge ourselves and say, let's go solve for the problems and innovate. And it's risky, it's a challenging thing to do. We could trip and fall flat on our face by trying to invent new ideas and then wrap our game around those. But I don't think game genres move forward unless people are willing to do that. And so we are going to fearlessly charge forward and try a bunch of new ideas. And we really hope people love them, and we're going to find out over the next couple of years.
And Guild Wars 3, as he pointed out, came in with an interesting philosophy, addressing player problems. I had my stream talk about what their current player problems are. Instead of having some core idea, they look at where the genre is, what are people having friction with and they're not happy with during the stagnant period, and then seeing if they can do something about it. And they're not the only ones. Let's go into this. So Colin went on to describe a couple of things. Obviously, it's very early days for Guild Wars 3, and we haven't got any details yet, but he talks about a couple of things that they're focusing on. One is the joy of movement. I'm sure we're going to hear that phrase a hell of a lot going forward in regards to Guild Wars 3. The joy of movement. This is unsurprising. Whether or not you know it or not, Guild Wars 2 is actually one of the biggest innovators in the market. Their mount system is second to none. Absolutely phenomenal. It's easily the best mount system in MMOs that has ever been created. It's so good, in fact, it has been lifted wholesale from other games. Looking at you, World of Warcraft, yoinking your roller beetles / goblin cars, and of course dragon riding, kind of plucked straight out of Guild Wars and stuck into their game, along with a number of other systems that Guild Wars innovates. Guild Wars' problem isn't actually that of whether or not it's any good. That will be a subjective buffet type situation, or actually ice cream sprinkles, but actually just their lack of marketing. Guild Wars 2 has expansions come and go, and nobody knows about it, even me. Doesn't even find out about it until it's out. It's a tragedy, but they are innovators. They do try, they do take risks, which is why I'm excited about what they're coming up with, as well as what FF14 is doing to also address the same problem. So the joy of movement, they're going to do something with momentum. So if you jump off a cliff, you're going to gain speed, and who knows what this is going to turn into. Instant mounts with no cast bar, just being able to land and fly like Avatar, or use it in some sort of combat motion to make more damage in some sort of type of way. Very curious to see what this how this translates into gaming. But the big one, and I think this makes sense from what we're talking about with this aging player base and everything else, is the combat. Because this is also what FF14 believes is the way to move forward, the way to get that new blood in, and the way to innovate. MMO combat has been crazy stagnant for a really long time in nearly all games. Typically, you tab target or select some enemy, and then you have a whole array of spells on a bar, and the best you could do is figure out the right order to press them in. Thumbs up. We're all very comfortable with that. If you pick up a new MMO, you're kind of going to pick that up, you know? It's not going to be too complicated. ESO tried something interesting with their parry system and active shield blocking. You know, some games have tried to move this forward, but generally speaking, it has remained relatively the same. So Guild Wars 3. Let's talk about the advantage they have there. Unlike WoW and FF14, and I will refer to these as the big three, that's what I believe they are, those two have one problem. They don't release new versions of the game. WoW is releasing many versions of the game, but generally based on their older products. FF14 has one singular product that they release. Guild Wars hasn't done that, and that's been advantageous. They have Guild Wars 1, and then they have Guild Wars 2, an entirely separate game, and now they're going to make Guild Wars 3, and all three of them are very different. While they might be set in a similar thematic and lore-based world, the way they play is very different, and that gives them an advantage. Obviously, borrowing again, they saw what WoW did with all the classic launches and have done the same thing, launching Guild Wars 1 Reforged, and also doing a very smart move of having a sit-down with the Guild Wars 1 leads and the Guild Wars 2 leads to promise these games will all run concurrently. Now, the smarter thing they did here was, unlike grinding gear with Path of Exile, where they promised there'd be no disruption to PoE 1, while the PoE 2 is in development, which turned out to be massively untrue and led to lots of fan backlash for a year-long drought of content for a game that was usually an absolute bombardment of content. They've sat down and said, we're keeping both of these games running while Guild Wars 3 is coming. At the same time, we're not going to be doing any new big content launch for Guild Wars 2, but we are going back and revamping and modernizing the whole game, even addressing some infamous fights, which are memes amongst the community, which I massively disagree with, because I think it's a rite of passage to experience those things, because they're so horrific. I never legitimately thought I would see a boss fight done worse than Duke Nukem Forever. And this is giving me that. That is the thing that has come to my brain. I'm in shock. What's that noise? But they're going to be spending their time bringing that up to spec so they can keep supporting it going forwards while Guild Wars 3 is coming out at the same time. Coming back to it then. Guild Wars 3 can work entirely different to Guild Wars 2 because Guild Wars 2 is still going to be there if you prefer that. Similarly, if you don't like either of those, Guild Wars 1 is still there and also gives them that World of Warcraft advantage, which we've seen massive amounts of recently, is they don't need to create content for one product and then have this lull while they make the next one. This is FF14's current situation, but perhaps they're okay with it given their style of just wait till we release more content. We're okay with it. These games would obviously prefer you to be online all the time. I look at it this way. Certainly for a non-subscription based game like Guild Wars, they work off microtransactions and you sometimes purchasing a different content like Living World. If you're not logged in and playing, you're not going to buy the microtransaction for it. It's as simple as that. You know, WoW wants both, as we've seen with the souring they've done on housing, with the giant amount of cost applied to some of those things, because they want you not only online in one form or another, regardless of what version of the game you're playing, but also buying microtransactions at the same time. Classic Blizzard move. But Final Fantasy XIV working differently. Guild Wars 1 is going to stick to this model and allow them to take some risks. So we talked about the joy of movement. The big one is changing combat. I alluded to this earlier, but not only is Guild Wars 3 going with this route, but Final Fantasy XIV is doing the same thing. They both know of the issues, as does Blizzard, but this is where they think they can get an inroads. Combat in video games has advanced a lot over the last 10 years. It's actually very easy to look at something like the original Castlevanias, for example, and then look at the latest and greatest, which was announced this weekend, of what Castlevania looks like now. They're similar, but God, they work differently. They work so differently. Combat in video games has come a long, long way, certainly over the last 20 years that some of these games have existed, and now it's time to bring that in. One of the big things I talked about is buttons. This makes sense. If you look at what younger people are playing, I have 2 kids now who are avid gamers, they're not playing things that have 12 buttons to press. They're not doing it because they don't need to. What they're certainly not doing is sitting down and reading paragraph-long tooltips that all interact with something. I would point to WoW's talent system as being the most egregious example of this. Something you take on row 2 has some dramatic effect on row 12, and it's buried in a bunch of synergies and mini buffs and how this changes this and this changes this, which leads to people just copy and pasting a bunch of talents because they're not going to read all that. And youngsters certainly aren't going to read all that, at least en masse, which is what the guys want. Instead, they're picking up things like MOBAs, ARPGs, simple FPS games, because they don't have to learn much. It's the old red versus blue argument. You take a complicated sport to follow, like, say, cricket, and compare it to overwhelmingly popular football. Even though they both have a lot of depth and intricacy to them, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the guys on the left want to kick the ball into the net on the right, and vice versa. You can pick it up and understand what's going on without anybody explaining anything to you whatsoever. And you can do that in a lot of these games. League of Legends' popularity has been maintained for so long because even a beginner can pick up a few buttons and off they go to the races. You've got like 6 buttons. You're fine. You're good to go. MMOs don't have that advantage, and it looks like both of them really want to simplify that. How are they doing it then? And what do you think about this is where we're at. So Guild Wars 3 hasn't given details on it yet, but they're looking to action RPGs and ARPGs for their combat in Guild Wars 3. They're looking for a slicker, more intuitive. The screenshot they shared, we could overly read into this, doesn't appear to show any form of tank or healing. And I know somebody here is going to go, actually, Guild Wars doesn't use tanks. You're a liar. Okay? While they may not have quote-unquote the tank class, like, you know, a warrior, a prot warrior in World of Warcraft, or a Dark Knight over in Final Fantasy XIV, you know that, I think the best description of it is yesent. Yes, there's tanking. Somebody will be a tanker in some form, and healers will be doing those kinds of things. Let's not pretend that doesn't happen. But it didn't show that at all in their screenshot, which I found interesting, if they're going to move away from the Holy Trinity. What it did show is archers and people attacking from behind. And we talked about this joy of movement with momentum, being able to use verticality perhaps. Are they looking for a more Metal Gear Rising type approach, a Bayonetta approach in open world combat? Are they looking for more FF16 perhaps? That kind of combat, which is very, very popular there, very flashy, very beautiful, but also not locking you into these minor spells. Now, I will point out here in my MMOs, I love having some extra spells that don't get used all the time, but are nice and thematic and interesting. I like that stuff. But when it comes to the core rotational gameplay, probably not needed to have 7, 8, 9, or 10 buttons that are part of your rotation, and games are moving away from that. WoW did a culling recently. Wasn't a overwhelming, some will disagree, but it wasn't overwhelming, still plenty of buttons on the bars. But Guild Wars 3 is coming with a new approach, and then we recently saw FF14 do the same thing. Their announcement of Evercold at FanFest NA revealed they're going to rework every job in the game and introduce Evolved Mode, which essentially is the same thing. They're going to be dropping a lot of what they consider excess spells down to just a few. Now, obviously, Guild Wars 3 and Final Fantasy XIV are console as well as being on PC, meaning controllers are important, which also makes sense to try and get that younger audience in who probably grew up with a controller and not a mouse and keyboard. Now, Evolve Mode is doing the same thing, we think. Reducing the amount of buttons, making them much more flashy and impactful, more interesting, even to the point that they're going to be selling and rewarding in-game cosmetic modifications to those spells, because when you hit that button, you want it to feel juicy and meaningful and not be bothered too much about whether you did your 1, 2, 3 in the correct order. It should be simplified and more interesting in order to have more fun. One of the comparisons I like to make here is shotguns in video games. There's a billion shotguns in video games, yet some games just do it better than others. You can take something as simple as a shotgun, and with the right sound effect, the right kickback, the right response from enemies, you can have a completely different experience every single time. And then sometimes it's even a pro of the game, like you should fire that shotgun. It's really good. And they're looking to do that here with just taking simple spells, making them impactful, more interesting, and seeing whether it flows. Now, it might not, and that's the risk. But in this world of borrowing from each other, if Guild Wars 3 and Final Fantasy XIV come out with a system that people overwhelmingly love, certainly after months, we obviously have that honeymoon period with any new feature where people like it, but months in, like, this is just way better, then you will see the others borrowing from it and moving forward. Is this the innovation I'm hoping for, though? And I would say probably not. Because risk, as we talked about earlier on, is really scary. And too much risk, too much change of the norm, especially in an established game, is very risky. What I hope to see, and Chris here in the office agrees with me as well, is some friction and some sort of Helldivers-based interaction with the world. My biggest problem with MMOs actually isn't the minutiae, the combat system, whether or not I can mount. That's all whatever stuff to me, to be honest with you. My biggest issue with MMOs that I've had for the last 10 years, and one of the reasons I've drifted away, is I feel no connection to the worlds I'm in. At all. And that's something I really miss. I haven't felt that since original Wrath of the Lich King. When I felt like we represented our realm, it mattered. When you went into a BG and you saw one of the other servers, notoriously, realms like Alakia would appear, you knew you were in for a rough time, like it meant something. If I saw people from the realm, they were a name. In World of Warcraft, very rarely do people refer to each other a name. You're rogue, warrior, paladin, whatever. In FF14, thankfully, you still get referred to as your name, but probably because the job names are too long to type. But that sense of community and feeling is gone. It's one of the things people really love about the classic versions of the game, is that sense of community and connection to your world is somewhat returned. But in nearly all the games I play right now, I don't feel that sense of connection. And I really feel like Helldivers did show, if you've not played it, is they run these events where one of the devs is a character. And that character is affecting the world in some way, and the players have to come together to fight, win or lose against these challenges that have been put down. gives people a focus, a common enemy. And nothing brings people together like a common enemy. And especially in MMOs and fantasy worlds, if you have a pantheon of these people, which was Chris's suggestion, I loved it, of the devs, some are beneficial, some are good, some bring hope, others don't. They are Khorne, they are Nurgle, they are Slanesh, and they come for you. And can you fight back? Can you join as a community? Some people will worship them, some people will fight against them, some people will try to summon the good dev to help them out as their worlds are ravaged. I would love to see an MMO that gives that connection. I don't know. I want to feel a connection. That's my next big innovation for MMOs. I want to feel a new MMO. Because I don't want to play Classic again. Because I'm sure some of you are going, just play Classic. I did it. I did it to death. I want something new. And I think that's fair. I don't want vanilla ice cream anymore. I don't. Half and half will do. I'd love to see your thoughts on this. But needless to say, risks are being taken. Will it be enough to reinvigorate the genre that we love so much? I don't know. Maybe. But we'll pay close attention to it. So make sure you're subscribed. Because as we find out more, this will go further. I'll see you again. Bye, everybody.